Welcome to our honest first impressions of Assetto Corsa Evo. Assetto Corsa Evo just came out on Steam as an early access title, and yesterday we had a chance to play it for many hours. Following on from that, I'm going to tell you what's good about it, what's not so good about it, what you should expect, who this simulator's for, and whether or not it's worth you yourself buying into the early access if you haven't bought into it or you're considering it. We're going to start this video going through the positives and what I think's really good with this title, and then we're going to delve into the dark misery and despair, of which there's quite a bit, sadly. But we're doing the positives first. Now, remember, if you want to be able to unsubscribe when we get to the negatives and you're upset, you need to subscribe first. So do click that subscribe button, and whilst you're at it, your cursor's so close, you might as well click the like button as well. I mean, why not? It's literally just there. So, first of all, let's start with the positives. And I have to say, what really stood out with Evo is that the physics are absolutely fantastic. The nature of the vehicles, how you can move them around, the pliability of the tyres, the bite of the tyres, the way the grip comes and goes, the dynamics of the vehicle and how you can play with the vehicles is absolutely fantastic. It's very reminiscent of the original Assetto Corsa, and the road cars in this, they just feel super natural. And even better, unlike the original Assetto Corsa, you can actually drive on curbs, brake on curbs, and attack curbs properly. Which, if you tried to do in the original AC, you would find yourself spinning in some rather weird ways, like someone had put fairy washing up liquid on all the curbs. So, fundamentally, the basic driving in this is really good. In some ways, I'd actually say the base physics of this, to me, are somewhat more appealing than the original Assetto Corsa. Compared to games like Automobilista 2, it's no contest. Vehicles in this drive like actual cars. Even compared to LMU and other good games on the market, it's really up there. Like, it's just very naturally handling physics. Now, I'm sure the more that we play it, there'll be some quirks that stand out more. There will obviously be a meta to drive this. That's the case with all racing simulators. In the short time driving it, with 5 or 6 hours of driving it so far, I did notice that it is more sensitive to the degree of steering angle and braking. So when turning and trail braking into a corner, the game or the simulator tends to want you to have the wheel more straightened up. Otherwise, you'll get more rotation. However, that is offset by the fact that the cars are actually generally more progressive in grip loss, a little bit less snappy than the original Assetto Corsa, and in many ways, a little bit more forgiving, and more forgiving than many other simulators, to be honest. Obviously, the original Assetto Corsa and this have far more realistic tyres than iRacing, where God knows what's going on with those. However, under the limit in iRacing, the cars rotate with a bit more poise and are more agile to rotate, which is one of the aspects of iRacing I do really like. And I do think, unfortunately, if you're a fan of that, this definitely has that slightly stiffer kind of feeling that you get from AC, ACC and some other simulators, where you don't quite get that really agile roll, which I think only iRacing does, though that's a great part of iRacing. However, as soon as you get onto the tyres in iRacing, the whole sim breaks down. But yeah, this is very much like the original AC in terms of how the end drive and approach is. As always, there'll be subjective aspects to what you like and dislike about car handling and quirks and nuances, but the physics in this are just great. And then if you're going to compare it to stuff like Forza and Gran Turismo, no contest whatsoever. Really of note as well is you obviously have the different tyre compounds in this, and you really do notice the difference in the behaviour from the sport tyres, the road tyres and the wet tyres. Obviously this has the dynamic track in it, wet track, dry track. You really notice the cars wanting to step out if you go over a bit of a puddle or a wet area on the circuit. So I haven't done enough wet driving to really go into depth with that, but that is certainly something that stands out from the original Assetto Corsa. and it also seemed a little bit better from my experience of driving in the wet with ACC, but I can't comment on it too much because I haven't gone into it that much. I will say though, the dynamics of the wet track in iRacing, the variability of the racing line and the puddles and stuff in iRacing, I think their wet track technology is actually much better than this. iRacing's is much better than Assetto Corsa Evo's wet track technology. However, iRacing's tyre model is so broken at the limit, it's utterly irrelevant. The tyres actually are more like tyres, and so on balance this seems to me to be a lot better, even if the underlying track tech is worse in many ways. So yeah, physics, absolutely superb. Now I'd also like to mention the audio. For me, I actually really like more muted, tame and less obnoxious audio. I know some people like really aggressive, loud audio, and so this is obviously, there's a large degree of subjectivity. Also, some people are going to be using the audio to hear what the car's doing more, and some people will want very literal audio. If you've ever been in a real race car with a race helmet, especially a lower powered race car like a converted road car, it can actually be quite hard to hear quite a lot of stuff. It can be very, very muted. A lot of sim racers I think don't realise this because they've seen race cars from outside where they're very loud. Sometimes in a car it can be quite hard to hear it. You can feel the vibrations through the seat but not necessarily hear it that clearly. I actually think that Evo, with the cars that I've driven, does a really good job with the audio. It doesn't feel like it's super over the top. It feels quite rich. It feels like there's a good amount of range to the engine note, like when you're downshift and you hit the rev limiter, the skid sounds. There were some audio bugs like the reverb from walls, and seems like there's some like audio normalization or some compression going on. There's some things going on. Seems like the kind of thing they just need to polish. But I'm actually really quite hopeful for the audio in this. Again, audio is massively subjective, but I didn't find it obnoxious, and I felt like I could really hear what the car was doing, which for me is a really important thing. Going to be interesting to drive different vehicles in this in the future. Unfortunately, there's no real Formula cars to test how they sound. But for an early access, I actually really quite like the direction and the stylistic choices of the audio, and I think most people would generally like the audio in this, though there's going to be a proportion of people that would maybe prefer the more aggressively loud audio that you have in some cars in Automobilist 2, some cars in Race Room, and in ACC. There's quite an aggressively loud audio. Gives me a headache. A lot of people like that. For reference, I actually think the driving game with the best audio out of all of them for me is Dirt Rally, the Dirt Rally 2 and Dirt Rally 1. I think they nail the cinematic, immersive quality with depth, range, and tone, and being in tune. That's my sort of thing that I really like. And actually, I will say, it seemed like the tune of the audio was good in this. I've noticed with a lot of racing simulators, the engines sound out of tune. I mean, I do a little bit of music production, so maybe I notice it more than some other people. But you know, there should be like a harmony. Not with all engines, but in general, there should be like a harmony that you can sort of feel, which is often broken in many sims. But I think the audio, I was really quite happy with it. It didn't absolutely blow me away, but I actually really quite liked it, and I can see that being quite a good thing in the future. Now, in terms of graphics and details, again, I have to give Kunos credit. They are a developer that are mental about small details. The track quality looks superb, the textures look fantastic, the spectators that are animated on the track, really great, fantastic sense of speed, the actual car models and the car details, all the displays, Motec displays, the race logic display, all those things that you kind of start to take for granted if you play a lot of simulators, because the bar is just very high now with all the sims. But all those details and the sheer amount of detail there is absolutely fantastic, as you would expect, and also as you would expect from a developer like Kunos, with the original Assetto Corsa, Ferrari Virtual Academy, and Assetto Corsa Competizione. All of them have the attention to detail. You just can't knock it. They clearly have some deranged artists on their team, and they definitely need to be congratulated. One thing with the graphics though that really is great, that I think a lot of people miss, and don't really call attention to too much is that the track texture and the track detail of that track texture with Evo gives a really good sense of speed, and like you really do feel like you're going quick in these cars. Much better than some of the blander track surfaces that you find in some other simulators, and even at times in ACC, and certainly in the original Assetto Corsa. All those little track details and the way the highlights are picking up the sunlight, the little skid marks, that really gives you a good sense of speed, and I think you do feel like you're going quite fast in this. Personally, I really like that. It's a really good reference for how quick you're going to then know, you know, how much you need to brake, and that's a big problem in sims, that you don't feel often like you're going quickly because there's no G-forces. Also, the shadows, which are greatly improved over ACC, really do help, again, with that sense of speed as they start going under your car. Stuff that you can see right in front of you is really good for a sense of speed, so fair play to them there, and massive credit for that, as it's a detail that's often missed out. And for me, this is a weird thing to bring up, but it's very important for me, the fact that they have a nice lock to horizon setting. This means that for some of you guys, you'll be like, why is the car wobbling all over the place? Well, the reason is lock to horizon, it makes the track stable, but the car moves instead. If you drive a real car and you're racing in real life or driving in real life, you should be looking quite far into the distance and looking sort of past the apex, or like into where you want the car to go in the future, or even further past that to see what's happening, and you basically just naturally drive the car from how you're responding to it. As a result, in real life, your eyes filter out a lot of bumps, and you are not having to constantly refocus and readjust your eyes constantly. Whereas most sims, or a lot of them, they have this really bizarre lock to car focus, which feels great and immersive, but as you get older, or if you've got brain issues like me, can make you really, really motion sick. So I really appreciate the lock to horizon setting in this. It does have some other camera filter options. I've not really gone into them, but at a basic level, it's actually comfortable for me to play. So it's very important for me, and it's like if you're colourblind, or you know, you've got some weird disability and someone accommodates it. It's very important for that minority of people. So I have to again give them really good credit for that. Very similar to how it is in ACC. Being critical as I always am, it's not quite as good as I think the lock to horizon. Well, it's not really lock to horizon, but the camera settings that you have in LMU and in iRacing, where rather than using a lock to horizon, it's more that you have like a gimbal type camera with a bunch of smoothing on it. I mean, iRacing does have lock to horizon as well, but the rather than using a pure lock to horizon, more of a camera filter solution is probably a better all round. But lock to horizon is really good as a basic, and it doesn't have the clipping plane issue that Automobilista 2 has. So I'm really happy with the camera settings. So I just want to get that in there. And for those of you that get motion sickness, try lock to horizon. And for those of you that are confused by it, shut up. you would understand if you got motion sick. Although, actually, some people get motion sick from lock to horizon. So try both and just see what works for you. Everyone's a bit different, aren't they? So, right, those are most of the positives, the big positives. It's now time to pour tea over our face. So, I don't want to dwell on the negatives too much. It's early access, but you need to know, first of all, the user interface. It kind of works, but it's a bit slow. The layout is terrible. I do not know what they're thinking. It's a worse user interface than ACC's, which was already pretty bad. The flow of it doesn't make any sense. So the performance of it is pretty terrible. I really just don't understand. Even the original Assetto Corsa UI, which, you know, there's issues with the original AC UI, at least it followed pretty established, in many ways, forms of UI. Even from a console game perspective, if you're going to navigate this UI with a gamepad, which is clearly the design paradigm they're working in, it's bloody awkward and janky. So the UI and the actual menu system is atrocious. Hopefully it's something they can change and improve, but who knows what they'll do. I just don't know what they're thinking. Even the in-game UI, it's like, okay, it's a new engine, early access, you know, but like, do you remember with the original Assetto Corsa, how revolutionary the idea of being able to have apps and being able to move them around to position them and how that all operates, that is actually better than what you have in a game 10 years after. How does that make sense? Like, do you know, this is the thing with sim racing, guys. How is it that 10, 20 years after previous stuff, things are literally, objectively worse? There's subjective elements, but objectively, things have gotten worse. Anyway, so the in-car user interface, there's weird performance issues with it. It's workable, it's passable, kind of a bit like ACC's. It's more the performance issues of it which are a problem. But the general user interface as a whole, the pedal binding, it's not really intuitive, it's not very clear. You have to invert your brake and accelerator and clutch, even though I'm using House in Vale pedals, which are a very well-known pedal brand. The wheel, you have to select it from the list of the top of the options, and the default settings didn't really work too well. It's not exactly pushing the boundary forwards or an evolution of making sims accessible, and it's early access. Maybe they can get good defaults and dial this in the future. It's early access. I think people are going to be saying early access a billion times. However, yeah, it's just really actually pretty damn awful. The thing is, I know from a development perspective, they've had to build this engine. It's their own engine, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that you'll have to do in order for it to be console compatible. There's a whole bunch of stuff behind the scenes, which means that you can't do certain things, or it's very hard to do certain things. I understand the technical reasons for why this happens, and I appreciate that they're working very hard. I appreciate all this. However, from a consumer's perspective, that is entirely irrelevant. That's all that matters. The end result is all that matters. So I'm sorry, developers. I'm going to be talking about this from a consumer perspective. Apologies, but that's what I'm here for. So yeah, the UI, as you can tell, has inspired joy in me. Another thing worth saying is with the UI and aspects of the game, you notice in the bottom right hand corner it says offline. So the game is basically should work offline, and it will, I think, have an offline mode with content that's there offline. So if you don't have the internet, or your internet goes out, or their servers go down, I think you should still be able to access stuff. However, there will definitely be a lot of online integration with some core aspects of the game. That's a design choice by Kunos, and it makes sense if they're doing the stuff that they plan to do with car unlocks, upgrades, the Nordschleife or the Nürburgring things. I get it. However, it's something that you should be aware of, that I can see there being, every time there's a big update, anytime something weird happens with the servers, it's another avenue for there to be lots of random issues. Hopefully, Kunos do make sure that the offline mode has a lot of the single player stuff accessible, and that it backs up some degree of stuff locally and makes it so that you know, if it does go offline, it's not the end of the world. It's not like Microsoft Flight Sim where when the servers don't work, the entire thing collapses. So it's worth being aware of. I'm not entirely against that, but it's just worth being aware of. I mean, just look at this car layout screen. Oh my god, it's not. it's just sad. Right. Moving on from the user interface, we need to talk about performance. Now, I've not really fiddled with settings. We did make sure we had the latest graphics drivers, but it did seem like this sim is struggling to run at good frame rates, and when we were getting good frame rates, it was mostly due to leveraging DLSS, turning graphics down and things, and as a result you end up with some sort of artifacting on things. And you know, I really am hoping that this is an early access aspect. I did see at Sim Racing Expo with that technical demo they had, that was running at 120 FPS and looked pretty decent on a 3080. So I'm just really hoping that some of this is my computer being a bit weird or something, or some graphics settings. However, it doesn't fill me with hope, the performance this has, and I know a lot of people. We were live streaming this bizarrely to like 2,000 people. God knows how we're somehow being successful. Thanks to Kunos for making this game so idiots like me can have a living doing this. I appreciate it. But Lots of people were commenting that they were having frame issues and stuff, and there was some really weird hitching type issues. It seems like this game might have some sensitivity to memory and a whole bunch of stuff. I'm not entirely dismissive of the graphics performance. I can see how this could evolve into the future. It just makes me a bit cautious, and then really where that graphics performance makes me very worried is for stuff like VR. This feels like we're going to have similar issues with this as you do with ACC. And generally speaking, if a game on mid settings doesn't easily, and I mean really easily, hit 80, 90 FPS with a 3080, good luck. Good luck when you start using Quest 3s or even high resolution VR headsets, or if you want that overhead to get really, really good VR performance and really good VR performance in day, night, large grids, online events, rain, you know. So, you know, you'll get people with 4090s going, it runs really good. It's like, yeah, you've just spent £2,000 on a graphics card. Of course. So, the graphics performance, yeah, and then you do get like some pop-in and stuff. That's definitely an early access thing that can be dialed in. But you have to turn the settings up to avoid the pop-in, which then affects the frame rate. And then, like many new graphics engines, it has the issue where you're kind of locked into one frame rate dependent on your CPU and graphics card, and it doesn't really matter too much what settings you change. Unreal Engine, Counter-Strike and Counter-Strike 2, so Source, the new Source engine, bunch of new DirectX 12 engines and new engines have this thing where you will just get pretty similar performance, give or take like a 5% range, regardless of your settings. So all you could do is buy a new CPU and a new graphics card. Fiddling with it doesn't make much difference. Whereas back in the day, with the oldie game engines, you could really turn shadows off and you gain 20%, or you could really turn down anti-aliasing or other stuff and you gain a load of performance, and you'd have a big range where you could choose between graphics quality and performance. Now you're really locked in, and this game engine is very similar to in that regard. It seems that way so far. Early access. So though I think if you turn the graphics up, the lighting, the effects and stuff look really nice, it just doesn't perform that well. Certainly does not perform as well as Automobilista 2. And I would genuinely say, the thing is, it's a different paradigm. It does make sense for them to use DirectX 12. I'm not, you know, there's reasons to move to new engines and how that can be better in the future, and how graphics cards, new features in graphics cards, the new game engine will be able to benefit from that. Great. However, the fact is, AC1 looks absolutely bloody incredible and runs at 200-300 FPS on reasonably mid-end equipment. So generally speaking, AC1 looks better than Evo whilst running a lot better. And then of course, say like Madness engine, Automobilista 2, Project Cars 2, again that's now like 10 years old at least, runs twice as fast as this and in many ways looks better. So, you know, it's just, I again, from a development point of view, doing a games engine is insane. I have a lot of sympathy for the developers. To be clear, I really do appreciate the work that all the developers put into it. Any developer, this is not a Kunos thing. I really appreciate it. I feel, you know, but from a consumer perspective, what on earth? But it's alright, guys, because we'll use new DLSS and frame generation, introducing blur and latency, and it will all be fine. Developers do not need to optimise or care at all. The graphics card will smudge over everything. Just put Vaseline into your eyeballs. So that's the graphics. The graphics. Now it's time for the most arousing topic, and the one you know I love, force feedback. Oh dear bloody hell. So, I think most people will actually love the force feedback in this, because most people are actually stupid when it comes to force feedback, sadly. So, credit where credit's due, in a literal sense, in terms of like power steering and even many race cars and many road cars, they have really god-awful feel from the steering wheel in reality, and I think Kunos has actually managed to mirror that quite well. That sort of raw, dampened, gloopy power steering rack force feedback with a bit of a tug for when the suspension compresses, some vibration, and a very, very aggressive self-aligning torque. So when the rear's starting to step out, the wheel basically counter-steers for you, making it very easy to not spin and to catch the rear. And also, when you push the brake, it feels like something's happening, makes you feel like you're braking. And also the vibration for when the ABS is kicking in or when you're skidding a bit and stuff, really quite immersive. It will be different from wheel to wheel, but most people, due to how absolutely goddamn awful force feedback is in ACC, for example, LMU, for example, Gran Turismo 7, for example, most people will think it's absolutely fantastic, and they'll also equate it to their real road car. So in a literal sense, can't be too critical. However, in a real car, you drive by your bum and the seat of the pants feeling and the G-forces, and in a simulator you do not have those. Even with a motion simulator with traction loss systems can actually be really quite good, but they don't really work perfectly, and they're somewhat limited, and they cost £8,000 to £10,000. So the problem is, you need some other way to be able to feel what the bloody car's doing, and specifically exactly where the tyres are on the limit, and for that to line up with the limit. And you need a range of force for the force feedback after you have loaded the suspension up. You need to always have a range of forces there to really let you feel exactly where the limit is and how to balance that. The original Assetto Corsa absolutely bloody nailed that. Absolutely. And I'd say there's some force feedback files for Automobilista 2, and I'd say also Automobilista 1, they give you force feedback that really lets you feel very precisely what the tyres and the car's doing, so you can drive much more from feel rather than driving from rote memorization, basically just practicing stuff over and over again to know exactly what's going to happen from each input. And also means that you don't have to drive purely from visuals. Problem with driving from visuals is that you can only see stuff after it's happened. So you need if you've got a range of forces, you have a lead in before something happens to allow you to actually preempt it, again allowing you to actually balance and work with the vehicle, which is exactly what you do if you can drive a real car reasonably well. That is the process of driving. If you remove that, you are then basically driving a remote controlled car with a first person camera. Sadly, Kunos don't seem to understand this. ACC messed this up, and Evo as well has completely messed this up. Bizarrely with Evo though, because it's got road tyres and they've got a lot more, they're a lot less peaky, and I do think Evo actually does have more detail in some ways than ACC does. Bizarrely, it seems like the developer has just put a load of built-in damper on the cars that you can't remove, which I think means that basically if they trusted their user base and didn't treat the user base like complete morons, Kunos could actually expose the force feedback more to allow people that want to actually feel what the car's doing more precisely to feel the car more precisely. It's very, very strange. And as I say, the physics seem really superb in this, but the force feedback is so goddamn useless compared to AC and some other stuff. You probably won't necessarily notice those physics to the degree that you should do, because I'm only really noticing them because I'm very experienced at playing iRacing, just lots of simulators, so I really know what to look out for. I visually know what sort of behaviours to see in terms of it, the slide, how the grip returns. I know how to induce certain behaviours to test the physics. In AC1 you don't need to know any of this, you just drive and it's like, oh, this feels really natural, oh, I can feel what the tyres are doing, oh, that makes sense. It's the same anytime I've got in any real world car. It's like, oh, I can tell what the car's going to do straight away. Oh, it slipped out once, okay, I know exactly where that feel is. It's just not there with Evo. I don't think Kunos understand the genius that they achieved with the original Assetto Corsa. I think they just don't get it. So it's a bit of a shame, really. But it is what it is. Unfortunately, most sim racers don't know about this. So I think most sim racers will actually really like it. And in fairness to Kunos, it's way better. As it is now, it is better than ACC. It is better than Gran Turismo and a lot of other simulators force feedback. So as a commercial thing, fine. But I generally expect games to get better after 10 years, 20 years. I shouldn't be playing Richard Burns Rally and be like, oh, hang on a minute, this seems to have more detail. But, you know, I'm a miserable old sim racing git here. I'm too old to even really care that much anymore. I just like it to be better, but it's their product and people will disagree with me, so I've just accepted that and I'm drinking tea and sulking. What a child. Okay, so then really another worrying aspect of this, I think, is the AI and how it really isn't very good. And like the AI so far basically reminded me exactly of the AI in Assetto Corsa. Now, I'm one of the few sad people to have actually 100% done all the Steam achievements in Assetto Corsa. I think only like 20 people have done it because you have to actually have an issue to do it. And the AI in that game, it's what you'd call baseline passable, but not something you want to race. And you get way better AI generally in LMU, even in Automobilista 2 where they're really wonky and it depends, and Race Room. The AI in this is just, it's not there, guys. They need to do a lot of work on the AI. It's not as bad as Gran Turismo AI, I don't think. It has its own quirks. But yeah, the AI, which is quite worrying to me if you plan to play this as more of a single player game. Who knows? Who knows what's going on with that? Early access. So, I don't want this video to be too long, and I think that gives you the biggest issues, the biggest pros and the biggest cons with Evo as it is right now. Is it worth getting now? I can see a lot of people want to take advantage of the early access price, and I definitely think Kunos will keep working on this, and I definitely think it's very likely it will end up being a lot better with AC, ACC. Every time Kunos has taken on something, they keep working on it. They're not a scummy developer, and I really, really do actually massively respect Kunos' work ethic and attention to detail and what they're trying to do. So I really appreciate that. As harsh as I am, they do work bloody hard. So do all the sim developers. It can't be stated enough. So I think for me, it would definitely be worth getting. I think for hardcore sim fans, it's worth getting. But keep in mind that it is very, very early access. I actually honestly don't think they should have released this early access in this state. I think it needed at least 3 months, and then they could have gone with a bigger bang. Weirdly, the Sim Racing Expo demo would have been a better early access demo, I think, than this, or even just having one car and one track. I think, unfortunately, this has really shown off how this is like an early investor preview, or you know, it's really not ready for general consumption, even as an early access. I think it just makes Kunos look bad, but I think it will improve. It's going to be fun to see it improve. A bit annoying because I think we're all tired and fed up of bloody waiting a year, 2 years for games to polish and us paying to be the beta testers. I mean, I'm not paying. It's great for me as a YouTuber. I get to do update videos. I get ad revenue from that. I get to talk about it. It's amazing for me. But you're not all YouTubers, are you? And you're not all developers that get the cash flow, or publishers that get the cash flow. So for your average consumer, I think it's actually bloody terrible. But thanks again, Kunos, for supporting YouTubers. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think a lot of people could get it. Most people should probably wait 3 to 6 months. Keep playing AC, keep playing iRacing and other simulators. You know, those other simulators aren't going anywhere, and this will hopefully evolve into something. Especially if you're a VR player, I'd say just don't even bother for a while, because you'd be doing more fiddling than driving. Though I'm sure some people will, you know, get it to work decent in VR with their supercomputers, so maybe for them it's okay. But for the vast majority of people, just hold off. Hold off. Hold the door. Yeah. So that's it, guys. My train has been derailed mostly, but is still lingering on the track thanks to my respect for Kunos and sim developers in general and their history. The force feedback train though is exploded. It's like a plane has exploded the tank and it's gone everywhere. Kunos, please, for the love of God, allow people to tweak the force feedback properly, maybe a bit like how Automobilista 2 works with custom force feedback, or at least just do not have so much built-in damper on it, guys. It's, for the love of God. It's just sad. Oh dear. I'm sure people disagree with me, but there you go. Thank you guys for getting this far in the video. We'll do some more concise videos. We're going to be covering Sim Formula Expo. Thanks for, if you got this far, bloody well done. You probably have fallen asleep in the old people's home. But thank you for watching the whole video. We have a Patreon if you want to support us directly. I massively appreciate that. We are entirely independent, as you might have noticed, by how miserable we are and how directly honest I'm able to be. It's because we are... apparently I hate myself and I hate having an easy ride. So I really appreciate all the support that you guys give us. Till the next one though, happy strong tea drinking, take care, and goodbye everyone.